All right, so there is no actually on air tonight. This meeting is going to be taped and broadcast later. The television studio is currently in the middle of their move, so Bill, thanks. We'll start taping now. Apologize, everybody. We just got out of executive session. Now we're going to carry on with the normal business of the evening. We do have some announcements.
Yes.
Mr. Carlson.
Mr. Chair, I brought 4 announcements. So the Grafton Library will be hosting a blood drive on July 27th from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. at 55 North Main Street. Appointments are preferred. Walk-ins welcome. For more information, visit the Grafton Public Library events calendar. We continue to look for volunteers to serve on the Grafton Sustainability Committee, Grafton Commission on Disabilities, and the Capital Improvement Bylaw Committee. If interested, please send a letter of interest to care of the Select Board or email IDEC, that's IDEC, at grafton-ma.gov. The Concerts on the Common series have begun and will run every Wednesday until August 21st. Concerts begin at 6:30 p.m. The rain location will be at 1 Grafton Common in the Apple Tree Arts Great Hall. Movie nights return on July 18th. Bourne Ultimatum. The first movie on the Common this year is for adults. Get a babysitter, enjoy the evening watching a movie under the stars. Bring a blanket, chair. Movie starts at dusk. Thank you.
Thank you. First up for this evening, we have our representative, Mr. Moradian, coming to give us an update on the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Fellow board members, I'm sure everyone's here expecting riveting testimony on a budget update, but I don't have that for you tonight, unfortunately. I thought that being postponed a week would give us in the legislature enough time to get our acts together and have the conference committee come up with an agreed upon budget. That being said, we're in day 47 of a conference committee being named, and unfortunately we don't have the outcome decided quite yet. With a conference committee, there's 3 members of the House, 3 members of the Senate, and they voted to have private conversations, so everything's handled very tight-lipped, close to the chest on it. We are only getting bits and pieces, and that's more hearsay and guesses more than anything. What we've grabbed right now is the fact that it seems that most of the earmarks are decided one way or another. We don't know which way they're leaning, but they are decided, and that it seems that the majority of the contentiousness comes from outside sections between the House and the Senate and the budget. That being said, we've filed what's called a 1/12 budget, basically to continue for a 1 month of the cooperating paychecks being sent out, things of that nature. We've already done it once, and Speaker DeLeo just this week suggested to the governor that he put forth another 1/12 budget, which would bring us through August. With Ohio moving quickly in their pace towards a budget resolution, it seems that we're coming up in the rear in terms of getting one done. That being said, they want to make sure they do it correctly. That's why the 1/12 keeps us going. All of our core services, like I said, continue to stay strong, but that's unfortunately the budget update, which I thought would be a little bit more robust for you, but to be assured that if anything is to come up, I'll make sure the town's aware of what we're able to secure. So I thank you for your time, and I want to take this opportunity right now to congratulate the Lions Club on a wonderful concert on the Common. They do an outstanding job every year. I love attending. I love handing out American flags, and I'm looking forward to next year already.
Oh, thank you for coming out. Appreciate it. Do you have time for any questions? Anybody have any questions?
Absolutely.
Before, so you want to come back in about a month and
I will.
for the next 12th?
I'll reach out when we have some form of resolution,
Okay.
and we'll certainly let the town know of what we're able to secure and what's inside of the budget, and then we can come back and we can go over it should you want to.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Next item we have on our agenda tonight is the ADA self-evaluation and transition plan presentation.
Mr. Chairman, we have, as the board is aware, we received a grant from the Massachusetts Office on Disability to complete an ADA self-evaluation and transition plan, which, as you know, will make us eligible for construction grants in the future. We contracted with the Center for Living and Working, Mike Kennedy and Jim Mazik, who's a consultant that works with the Center for Living and Working. They put together this plan. They walked around town, looked in buildings, roads, curb cuts, etc. This is an executive summary. So they're gonna, I'll hand these out to you, and they're gonna come up and give a brief presentation on what they've put together.
Come on up, gentlemen.
First question is define brief.
All things relative, I suppose.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the Select Board and the Town Administration and the members of the audience. First, foremost, on behalf of the Center for Living and Working, in partnership with James M. Mazik Consultant Services, we just want to thank you for this opportunity to conduct this ADA self-evaluation and subsequent transition plan.
Thank you
So,
very much.
but what I'm going to do, I'm going to just give an overview of the self-evaluation portion of this final plan. First, foremost, the Americans with Disabilities Act, a civil rights law passed in 1990 and effective 1991 that prohibits discrimination in employment, programs and services offered by municipalities, on the basis of having a disability. So, we had our first survey of this particular building on March 26, 2019. We followed that up with a kickoff meeting with the department heads on April 4th, 2019, right in this very room. We had sent out self-evaluation surveys for town department heads and administrative offices, and we received 12 of those back. So some of the things that we've seen in the reading through the self-evaluation surveys and looking through the website and other various town publications, we see that the Commission on Disability, which is one of the requirements of the ADAs to have a Commission on Disability established in town. There was one here established back a few years ago, but it's been inactive. And in our write-up, we were suggesting that we try, that the town of Grafton reestablish this commission. And earlier today, I heard, and then right before we came in the building, met with Roger Trahan, who told me that that is actually in process. So we could certainly make a change to our write-up now that that's happened. It is, or should I say, in the process of happening. The next order of business a town would be required to do is establish a ADA coordinator, and looking. We know that Robert Berger, who is the town's building inspector or commissioner, is the ADA coordinator, but that information is only available in policy number 112. And policy number 112 also speaks to the town's ADA grievance procedure. Unfortunately, it's not notated anywhere on the town's website except in this administrative policies 112. So we suggest that that this information be made available on the Town of Grafton's website and under the Commission on Disabilities webpage. Would probably make the most sense. And let's see. Another thing that we noted is that in policy number 112, the ADA coordinator is mentioned by name as opposed to position. So we're recommending that as opposed to a person's name, maybe have it be the inspector of buildings, be the ADA coordinator in case of a personnel change. The public notice, Title II of the ADA requires that public entities notify participants of its non-discrimination policies. And, currently there doesn't appear to be such notification of non-discrimination policies relative to persons with disabilities in brochures or on the town hall. There is some language of non-discrimination in Chapter 3 of the general personnel policies in the employee personnel handbook, and that is buried well into the human resources portion of Grafton's website. So, our recommendation is to, have that, this notice be on the website, on public meeting notices, and any other activities that may take place, in town. Policies, procedures, practices. A public entity, should make reasonable modification in policies, practices, or procedures when the modifications are necessary to avoid discrimination on the basis of disability, unless, of course, the public entity can demonstrate that making the modifications would fundamentally alter the nature of the service or program or activity. So obviously, someone like myself knows that I'm probably not going to ever be hired as a police officer. I understand that, but there's nothing that says I couldn't, work in the administration or even in dispatch. Just for clarification purposes or just examples. Reasonable accommodations, under the ADA. Many of the self-evaluation surveys that were completed also included some job descriptions, and some job descriptions included language on the work environment and on special requirements, including physical ability, environmental factors, but they weren't consistent. There was a huge difference between the ones that came to us with the self-evaluation surveys, but looking at the job postings that were on the website, didn't. So it's a recommendation to have a consistent you know, reasonable accommodations policy, and we do have a sample of this accommodations policy in the final ADA plan. The you know, maintenance. You know, when you know, buildings you know, make themselves accessible for you know, all you know, residents and visitors, including people with disabilities. The accessibility features need to be you know, maintained. So some of the you know, some of the deficiencies that Jim and I you know, noticed when we were doing our surveys were you know, bathroom stall doors no longer self-closing, missing and or broken you know, stair or ramp railings, entry and exit doors with excessive operating forces, you know, to open, and non-compliant closing speeds, routes of travel and walkways that were deteriorated to the point that it created you know, change in surface levels that you know, were like tripping hazards. So those are just some examples. There's more cited here, but I don't want to you know, bore you with all of those. Effective communication, auxiliary aids and services. Based on what was submitted, you know, in the survey responses, there are some there are some auxiliary communication aids available, including right here available in this room. We understand that there's assistive listening devices in both this room and I believe it's room F on the second floor. You know, just let the cable operator know that that you need these, and you also actually have a little sign posted that that speaks to its availability, which is a great thing. The some of the other auxiliary aids available that were pointed out were the town clerk's office has the Automark voter assist terminal, which enables people with you know, any type of person with a disability that cannot you know, mark a ballot, a regular ballot. So this could be you know, people without you know, good hand function. It could be people with various levels of you know, visual impairments. The police have a TTY for you know, for people who are deaf and basically type text their messages in as opposed to talking, and American Sign Language interpreters if needed. And I already touched on the town administration with the assistive listening devices, and they also have a TTY available. The assessor's office has a TTY as well, and but you know, most of the rest of the responses were you know, either email or social media. Some just said, you know, phones and email only. Then, you know, finally, we were asked to survey the polling places, and the town of Grafton has two of them, one being the Grafton Middle School, in this same, you know, complex that we're sitting in now. And the other one is in the Millbury Street Elementary School. The director of buildings, the school director of buildings and grounds, you know, gave me access to both of the buildings to and show me where the parking takes place, and you know, on the you know, day of voting, and both both, voting polls are in the subsequent gymnasiums. And, they have, parking, arranged, ahead of time, so, people can come right in and, vote and, go on their way. And my conversation with the town clerk, she confirmed, that, they do in fact have the Automark, voter assist, terminal. And it is, located where, on an accessible route. And it's, also, located in such a, area that the screen itself is not visible to the, voting, public. This is near and dear to my heart, ladies and gentlemen, because, many a times I've, on, election day, I've, made, poll site surveys, and you wouldn't believe how many of these Automark machines located right next to all the other voting booths. So someone now walking by can easily see what's on the screen. So that's one thing I've always wanted to point out. So these are just some of the highlights that are that came from the self-evaluation. And what I'm going to do now, I'm going to defer to Jim Mazik about the actual transition plans.
All right, moving right along. Still have time?
Yes, plenty.
Of course.
So, on that transition plan, what we look at is both the 2010 ADA standards and then the 521 CMR Mass State Building Code standards. As Mike pointed out, 2010 ADA standards, actually the previous standards, I'm going to back that in a second, are based on civil rights. It's equal access to program services. But it's also, when you're looking at some things, on the basis of feasibility, a cost basis, and then your availability of funds. So you're supposed to address those things as feasible and as when you can through your plan. One example, if something is, let's say you had a ramp, and the maximum running slope for ramp is 8.3%, and it's 8.5% or 6%, and it's going to cost you $100,000 to fix that ramp. That's not really cost effective to do. It would make it's more feasible, or it make more sense to then put those funds in another area, and you could document that you're not gonna for $100,000 you're gonna gain 0.2 to 0.3% versus making an entire building accessible by changing the entrance and that. So your plan will allow you to address that. 521 CMR is different. It's a state building code, and it doesn't deal with access to programs and services the same way that the 2010 ADA standards do. It's basically triggered by construction. So it's public buildings or non-public buildings, if they're commercial, and if the building value is such and you're doing this amount of work, this is how much you have to bring the building into code with the accessibility standards under 521. So a little bit different. So when we do the plan, we look at, and you can't see this from here, we talk about what the element is that is not in compliance. We put down the citations of 2010 ADA standards. That's not in your your executive summary,
Okay.
unfortunately.
They do have the full,
It's in
they
the
have the
packet.
full.
Oh, you have, okay.
Yeah.
And there are, there are some edits we found and made since giving to you, so you will be getting a new electronic and then a new hard copy, so. So we have then the code from the 2010 ADA standards, the code reference from 521 CMR, whichever is the more strict is what needs to be applied, because there are variations. And then we describe what needs to be done, and then we have listing here, priority, feasibility, timeframe, and cost estimate. So priority, 1, 2, 3, 4. Priority, we always say, is to get into the building, get into a facility, a site. Parking and an access, whether it be a rec site or whether it be a physical building. And then 2 would be getting, 2 is then getting into the providing bathrooms in the facility. 3 would be access to goods and services. And then 4 would be anything else that doesn't fall into those categories. And the feasibility, again, we use 1, 2, 3, 4. One would be, let's say there's a sign that's, a tactile sign that's maybe 6 inches too high. Or maybe there's a protruding object. Protruding object is anything that is between the height of 27 inches and 80 inches to more than 4 inches into that route of travel, which you had some here in the hallway. Because if I'm with a cane, my cane detection can't pick that up, and I might walk into that and physically hurt myself. So if I have something in which we put it in for this building, for example, you might have, I think, a TV screen. You can place a fixed object under that, and now you pick up cane detection. You don't have to physically move it and alter it. Anyone can do that. So we said feasibility is 1. 2, it might be changing hardware. Maybe you have a knob hardware, not lever hardware. You have your maintenance personnel can do that. We call it as number 2. 3, a little more complicated. Maybe your setbacks from your water closet don't meet compliance, so you got to hire a plumber. And if something is really complicated, you need to have an architect or an engineer. That is number 4, feasibility. Then we have time frame. We listed as immediate, near, or long. Basically, immediate is within a couple of years. Near is, I think, 2 to 5 years, or 2 to 6 years, and long term is 7 years and out. And then cost estimates. And cost estimates, basically base those upon current projects and standards. Projects that based upon actual construction projects or actual bid projects. And in some cases, if they're of a larger scale, if need to modify for wage and bonding and insurance, that sort of thing. So that's the outline of how this is put together. There are some things though to realize. I mentioned about the different standards. So there is a safe harbor, and this is all explained in here. So I'm not going to lie to you, but it's all in the report. We base it on the current standards today. But if there is a safe harbor, so if you built something back when the 1991 standards were in place, with 2000 and I think it's some 4 standards on rec, you're still governed by those. But ideally, the intent is to get up to the current standards. 521 CMR, and Mike knows more about this than I do, but there's movement now to kind of change all of that. There's actually been drafts out on the table, which would be more aligned in sync with ADA. So even the states are going to have to raise the standards on their regulations. There's also historic exemptions, and there's information in the plan about that. So if there is an historic property, there are exemptions and waivers, but you must go through a state historic preservation officer in order to do that. And that's with Mass Historic Commission. That's under the Secretary of State's office, Bill Galvin. There also are tolerances. So within this, if you look at the regs about state and federal, which are about yay thick, there are tolerances based upon certain setbacks. So if something was in, maybe it's got to be within 0 to 6 inches, whatever the dimension is. You get a variation, maybe a 1/4 inch. You can be outside that. If it's up to 36 inches, you could maybe a whole inch. You could be a tolerant. Or I think it's up to 40 something inches. An whole inch, you could be variation from that. You're within the tolerance. But there are no tolerances if you're a range. So like if you have your grab bars are 33 to 36 inches. If you're 36.5 inches, then you're not compliant. There's no tolerance. The same thing with slopes. If you have slopes, your running slopes without, your running slopes for a railing are 8.3% max. So your ramp, you have to have railings. If you're 8.9% or 8.5%, technically you're non-compliant. 5% is allowed as a walkway without railings. If you're 5.2%, 5.3%, technically you're out of compliance. You need to put in railings. So those are no exemptions on those. I don't want to go through the whole list. I kind of want to just point out a couple of things, because everything is in here in detail. But if you have questions about specific buildings, you can go back. Generally, there are some very commonalities throughout the buildings. In many cases with parking, might have some running slopes or cross slopes. Parking needs to be a level landing, 2% in both directions. And in many cases, wasn't quite 2%, might have been 3%. Some cases the signage was too high. It's minimum 6, you have to be 6 inches, minimum at the bottom, at 96 inches at the top. Some are maybe 102 inches. Some might have been too low. Some cases, the running slopes, as I mentioned before, to some of the buildings exceeded that allowed. for, a walkway, so now it's technically ramp, but there are no railings. So the recommendations on case would be either to reconstruct those concrete walkways, to be under, at 5% or lower, or put in the railings, but a railing's $135 a square, a linear foot times 2, that's $270. Get a 10-foot ramp, you're looking close to $3,000, so concrete's cheaper, so it depends what you wanna do to make that adjustment. In many cases, well, a lot of cases here, and this is actually under ADA, not under 520 CMR. If you have glass panels and doorways, there's a maximum height on those, and that's 43 inches. So in many places you exceeded that. And the reason is because you are in a chair and you can't see, and so, and we note that. I mean, it is what it is. In some cases. In many cases, the stair railings were non-compliant. Non-compliant because they were too thick. They'd be like, I think it's 1.5 inches, and they'd be oval in shape. Also the height level. And you also need to have extensions at the top and the bottom. And the bottom extensions need to be a slope distance of 1 tread plus 12 inches level. So in many cases, that wasn't in place at the locations. A lot of areas, and again, I'm not going into specifics and everything, but in the bathrooms, the dispenser heights and the clearances, maneuverability wasn't to code. So ADA 520 CMR has a dispenser height in the bathrooms of 42 inches, but in other locations it's 54 inches. Under 2010 ADA, it's 48 inches. That's the max. So in many cases, in some of the bathrooms, you might have soap dispensers at 52 inches, or paper towel dispensers at 53 or 54 inches. So those would need to be all lowered. Also, in many cases, when you go into a water closet, your toilet, your stall, and the water closet, the flush valve needs to be on the approach side. Because if I'm, in a chair I'm using, I need to access that flush valve here. Many times it's on the near side, closer to the wall, more difficult to operate. So a couple options in that, you could try to reverse the flush valve, more difficult to do, or just put an automatic, push, not blind, but one sensor detection to then flush the toilet, to don't deal with any flush valve at all. And in some cases too, many cases, the toilet seats have to be between 17 to 19 inches above finished floor to the rim height. Many cases they were too high or too low. And then there's a setback from the near wall to the side wall, 18 inches on center, 42 on center. Many cases they were too close or too far. So again, that was a commonality in many of the different places throughout. Let's see, on the fire department, because that's a little bit different. You have multiple buildings, you have your headquarters, and then you have your different substations. So there's some options here on what to do. If all your operations or administrative activities are held out of the main office, you can address at the substations a certain way. Essentially, it's not open to the public, and everything has to be done elsewhere. If there are any activities that are done in there, and even some meetings might be held, then at a minimum, you need to have access, parking and access into those facilities. And that would be some cost, but because the rest of those buildings are people, they have certain, must meet in certain abilities and functions to perform those jobs, then you wouldn't need to make the rest of those buildings accessible to the public, because no one, and even from an employee standpoint, because it would have to be, fully able to do certain functions to get back to those areas. On the parks, and I'm going to go just a general statement on all, and then touch the beach, and then basically just comment sidewalks and programs. On the parks in general, and you're not alone, but many people, many municipalities are using wood chips, either wood chips or the rubberized chip material throughout their playground areas, and that is not ADA compliant at all. You can use that, so you need to have an accessible route of travel, which is a firm, stable, slip-resistant surface. It can be stone dust, it can be asphalt, it could be concrete, to and around, the facility. And then you have to have a material which meets certain ASTM standards around the plate components themselves. So if someone falls off something, you know, they won't get hurt. Anywhere else outside that area, which is not part of the accessible route, or the area around the plate components, typically that's a rubberized material on the plate components, you can use your wood chips there. But you can't use it on accessible route or around those play areas. Unfortunately, that's this stuff that's being called for is very expensive. I think it's $25 a square foot. So it adds up. Yes, and stone dust is $2 a square foot. So and asphalt's $5 a square foot. So you see the difference. And so the stuff typically used on the playgrounds but that's what the standards call for. But you're not alone. Probably 99% of the municipalities out there, they're using the wood chips. We're doing South Hadley right now, and wood chips everywhere. So it's one thing noted, you do have accessible portable toilets on a couple locations. Unfortunately, they're accessible, but they're not ADA compliant. The closing speeds are too much. In one case, the hardware wasn't compliant because you couldn't close the door with a closed fist. It was not a simple lever device. It was something you couldn't do it. The maneuverability clearances weren't there, and the setbacks weren't there. The dispensers were too high. The grab bars weren't in sync. So again, yes, they were ADA accessible because they were wider, and we have examples in here in the report of what it should be, but they are technically not. So I guess in the future, you should make sure when you hire a vendor, it needs to be ADA compliant, not just accessible, and they need to prove that to you.
So people mark it as accessible while not being ADA compliant?
I don't know what they marked it.
Yes.
Okay.
But you need to make sure, and you have in there, we have your examples, photographic examples of what they should be. And you can see, for the ones you have, they don't have that movability and clearance. Silver Lake Beach. Silver Lake Beach, again, there's accessible parking, but it's on sand. Obviously, it's, again, a firm, stable, slippery surface, that's not. And then there is a matting that goes up to the beach, sand, but then it really doesn't go anywhere else. So really, it needs to be either an accessible route to that entire, to the beach area itself, to the water itself, to the pavilion, to the bench areas, to the concession, and that can be done a different way. It can be a more permanent, or it can be by use of the matting. You can do that. And also on the dock, needs to be switch plates between the connection of the piers, and there needs to be actually a protective, like, berm or barrier, because if I do get out there, now if I have the mats out there, and I can get out there if I'm in a chair or even a walker or whatever, and I get onto the pier, all of a sudden, I'm going right into the water. So that's why you need to have, I think it's 4-inch protective barrier around the exterior of that. And 521 CMR does not address piers, but ADA standards do. So you can, and we reference right there where you can find the standards, and we have, right up of what it should be. So the town count, that your gazebo itself is not accessible, there's not a ramp, and there's no stair railing, so that's an issue that needs to be addressed. So those are more than the major issues. The major issue, I'm just going to point out just a couple of things on curb ramps and sidewalks. The biggest issue from our standpoint on the town common sidewalks was where was that? That was going to be next to town, Worcester Street, next to Townhouse. So you're going across Worcester Street, and there's a curb ramp. And it looked like were those fairly new when those were done?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Really? Okay. So that's the running slope the max is 8.3%. It's a 14% running slope. And it needs to be a level landing on top. It's not level. And it needs to be at least 4 feet wide. I think it was 32 inches. So, and Mike, Mike's like, I'm not even going over there.
No.
No.
No, I watched
No.
Jim across the street.
No.
Is it the one Grafton Common side? Because the building
Apple
and the
Tree.
stairs are right there?
Next to the Apple Tree Arts
Yeah, I know
building.
Yeah.
That's the curb cut Jim's referred to.
So I don't know what the ownership, I don't know which way the public way, the right of way goes. You could actually, but there is some plantings here and the right, then you have, I think it's either concrete or brick to the building. And you could take that if you had to take it or if you owned it.
At the town-owned building.
Okay, then you own it. Then you could go right up there, reduce, and you could get your level landing, and that wouldn't be an issue, and you could reduce your slope. So that was the big issue on that one. There were some other ones, but that's all in the report, but that was definitely, there was that monument, the opposite side, and there's a stone, well, if it's stone, it's not slippery, and it's not stable, so really that should be a firm, hard, stable surface, whether it be, concrete, asphalt, stone dust or something. Or you just close it off to the public, put a little chain across there and it's not, you can't access it.
So pavers, for example, are
You-
like a no-no?
Pavers aren't a no-go, but they're a maintenance no-no. So actually what we recommend, or I recommend, different hat, we always see construction projects, like a street print, where you could do, cause it's concrete or asphalt laid with a pattern and painted.
So interestingly enough, this is really kind of unrelated discussion. Town just approved a plan to overhaul the whole Grafton Common
Yep.
with brick. So what I'm hearing,
Bricks, but you have to maintain it, cause as you know,
right, but that can cause
It can.
compliance issues.
oh yeah, yeah. You've had some down in Mill Villages Park, I didn't point out, you had some issues down there. That's, Nelson Library parking, that's brick, I think.
Oh, right,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, those are maintenance problems. So again, they look nice, but there are alternate types where you can do, that street print, and then if you do some coloration and you get the indentation, it looks like brick. But that's,
Yeah. If I could add, being a, wheelchair user, bricks are a nightmare. They look great when they're, first set, but you know what, our weather extremes, the last bunch of winters, and I'm sure they're not gonna be any, more, less, radical. I mean, next thing you know, they start heaving up, creating, change in surface levels. So now we're talking tripping hazards, we're talking, and then, they end up, not looking nice. And I know, bricks are popular in historical districts because, they got that, retro look, but they're a nightmare. So I just, can't I don't, recommend them. I did just in the long run, as Jim mentioned, maintenance could be a real bear. And I'm sure like, most other municipalities, I mean, the folks that are responsible for that are, quite busy just doing the day-to-day, activities that they have to do.
and the other thing I think, correct me if I'm wrong, there had been discussion, I understand that, vibration being somehow incorporated in the future, vibration standards. And so if in a wheelchair and so how much vibration, and obviously if you have brick or other unstable, which that's gonna cause more vibration, so, but it's not in it yet, but that's something that is being discussed. Just two quick things, and then, back on the, comment, I just wanna go quickly on North Main Street, a couple things there. So one of the issues on the parking spot on the common, which to me is a real tripping hazard, but also could be a flat tire. In the access aisle, or in the parking space in the access aisle, there's an old remnant of what was a light pole or something that was there. And it's sharp and jagged, sticking up right out of the asphalt. So it's a tripping hazard if I'm sight impaired. It's also potential for a flat tire. So that's a big issue. A lot of the crosswalks go into just 4-inch granite curbing, so you know that. And then there's the sidewalk on the far common, which is not allowed. It's pretty much across where it goes across the street, and the middle of the street kind of veers to the right. So if I'm sight impaired, I don't know where I'm gonna go, because it should be, and so that's a major problem. So if you're doing some work at the common, if you're doing something with curb ramps, that's all gonna be corrected, because that is all non-compliant. In North Main Street, we were asked by your building commissioner to look at one section of North Main Street, because normally you're just gonna look around the common. And, obviously, and I don't know if I'm at, what's the place we had a,
Post office pub.
pull-up spot, opposite side of the street. But that whole section of sidewalk.
Yeah,
See,
well, the dentist offices, it's the reveal is.
Yeah. Real is
25
tremendous.
inches, it's huge.
And there are some options there, variance of one, but there are some potential options, and that's in the report. The reveal is tremendous. But also, there are some number of driveways, which the cross slopes are probably like, oh my God, probably 12, 13%. So when you do reconstruction, and this may, and I, with my different hat on, we do this, we have to end up going to do temporary easements, and we have to reconstruct people's driveways, because you need to maintain that 2% max on your cross slopes throughout. What happens there, kind of like this, now the car's gonna bottom out. So you're gonna have to end up going and doing some temporary work, right-of-way easement, and can reconstruct it to make that nice, smooth gradient. But that's a major problem going that area, because anything a little more than 2%, if you're in a chair, that's a real hazard for tipping over. Deteriorate sidewalks, again, curb ramps pretty much throughout that area. And then when I was down there, and I went, the technical, the push buttons for the lights, none of them worked. I'm trying to use them, cross and see, push force, time, speed, all that, and nothing works. So that all needs to be looked at. That's also written up in the report as well. So there's a lot of stuff in here. It's all in here. Then there's, the general cost estimates, prioritization. You need to look at that and then see, how you'd want to prioritize your things. Once your plan is done, as you know, you're eligible for the MOD grants, but you're also eligible for CDBG under Mass DHCD, and you'd be as just as competitive as anyone else, because the format was changed about 3 years ago in terms of how one applies and the whole scoring and competitive process. So you've got a couple of opportunities, and those grants are up to $800,000 for a single community. And that's a lot of work you can get done depending on how you want to proceed. So now that your plan is done, you're eligible for other ways to address these needs. We are going to make some changes. Is there any other, I don't know if you want us to hold on this for a couple of weeks, and then
Yeah,
is
there's
any
a couple
other?
things going on.
Yeah, I think that pole that you said was tripping, they pulled that out of the ground.
Yeah.
Since you've been there.
Okay,
Up the common.
okay,
Yeah.
all right,
And these two ramps are currently under construction,
okay.
so there's a month maybe, and that's.
Well, I mean, that's something, again, a time that we did it, then you can always, check it off.
We could just check it out.
Yeah,
We did
exactly,
it.
yeah, and that's, right, no, not completed, so that's a good thing, because then if someone does look at it, say, no, we already did this, you write it in your own writing. So you've done it. Any questions from any members? Or?
When you build that cost estimates for some of these individual projects, when you do the cost estimates, is that from your experience in?
So, my full-time job, I work for Regional Planning Agency. I'm a deputy director, but I also see Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. I do this on my side, on my nights and my weekends and my early mornings, and so my vacations. So, we oversee also on the CD side, which I mentioned, CDBG. I've seen hundreds of millions of dollars of construction projects, and probably in order of 10 or so million a year for towns in our region. So we have projects that we're overseeing: streets, sidewalks, water, sewer, senior centers, ramps, buildings. So I'm pulling from current construction projects bid sheets. I'm also calling up architects and say, do you have a project like this? So I'm getting numbers from actual bid items, and I might actually, in some cases, rather than if I get a bid sheet and I get 4 different prices for lineal feet for a concrete sidewalk, or a square feet, whatever it's priced out at, I might take the 4 and average it off. So, but these are pretty much current. But then we'll take a wheel or whatever and measure, and I'll do the same thing with maybe some of the prices for like bathroom stuff. Okay, what's cost like for a water closet or whatever.
So for in this construction market we're currently in,
Yeah. They vary. They're going to vary a little bit, but again, for the larger projects I mentioned, you would if it's a design or something bigger, you're going to formally bid it out. Then you got to look at wage, you got to look at your bonding, you look at the insurances, you look at your contingency, and you might look another 30%.
Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, what's the relationship between priority and feasibility when you're doing this? So if something to me is less feasible, how much does that impact what you consider it to be a priority?
That's really your call. We're doing it from our sense of, okay, for our sense of priority, first thing is if you're getting into that area, that facility, that service program, and then the other is accessing that program and service. So, so that would be, to me, you have to get in there and you have to access whatever is in there. Feasibility, I guess then you look at, is it, I guess it would be a relationship, because does it make sense to put money into this building,
Right.
this site, And that's gonna be really something that you would have to decide to do. In some cases, it might not be. Some cases, you might look at, and I'm trying to think, I think this was an example here. South Hadley, sewer plant, temporary, okay. Firehouse Museum. Firehouse Museum, so it's 2 levels. And there's a museum on the first level part of it and a museum on the second level part of it. And there's actually then a step down to another level to get to. So to make that building fully accessible before it's in there, I mean, not cost effective.
Right.
So there's a couple of things you could do. You could actually make the first level accessible, and then you can't get to the second or first or third levels. Then you can maybe have a CD, you videotape or whatever, not videotape, but like a disc, flash drive, and make that available at a computer site on screen on the first floor. And then, so people can visually see what's up there. Maybe you bring some of those elements, you know, you change it every month, what's there. So you're bringing they're accessing what's up there without physical access to the site. Or you may make it temporary. If you've got multi-levels in a building, and so we're gonna spend, and so much with this building, $150,000, $200,000 for an elevator, and also to do. Well, if you can temporarily, or maybe in short term, maybe make a public/private meeting space on the first floor, which is accessible. So if someone comes in, you get a buzzer in all the departments, and they could come down and meet the clientele on that accessible location, rather than making every single floor level accessible. That would be an acceptable, you know, short-term measure until you figure out what's cost-effective for you to do.
Okay.
And a good example, Old Sturbridge Village, some of those old colonial houses, you know, someone in a wheelchair like myself can access the first floor, and then, you know, they actually have, you know, like a little, you know, video screen that will, you know, with a slideshow of, you know, the different, you know, rooms that are up on the second floor.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's program accessibility under the ADA.
Okay.
Anything else?
When do we have the what's next conversation?
I mean, the what's next?
In terms of what we're gonna do with this, I mean, what we don't wanna do is go through the trouble of getting this plan and having this information and not doing much with it. So, what do we do?
Well, I was thinking we would prioritize staff level, figure out the competitiveness of grants, find out what's the low-hanging fruit, get those underway and out of the way, and then the bigger projects we'll apply for grants for, and get them in the plan and pick the years in which we're going to do them. So if it's ramps, we know we need to do those are being done. All the door handles in this building, some are good, many are not. So those things I think we just do administratively through the budget process. We'll change those door handles, for example, but the bigger items we just have to take these numbers and just put them in the plan and figure when we're actually gonna do them.
So, and I can just add, now that,
Do you have something relevant?
Yeah, I do. I think the priority, from what I understand, is to hire or to appoint an ADA coordinator to then own this. And then as any subsequent project comes up, much to Tim's point on the priority list, Ed, is that, you know, these things begin to be implemented, especially if we have projects that are underway, that we at least align the outcomes of those projects with what this report is stating. So I think that's,
Well, you have an ADA coordinator.
who is that?
It's Bob Berger.
It's Bob Berger.
but
Okay.
your commission on disabilities would be important, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I was
I
gonna.
think
That's
that
something
commission
that
will
we'll
just
work
reach
out.
out to them.
Okay, I apologize. I missed
That'd be a
that.
great
Yeah.
charge for them
Yeah.
to.
But we have,
undertake.
yeah,
We have
Oh, yeah,
applicants
that's-
we
as
have
well.
applicants for that.
Great.
Yeah, Disability Commission, you know, just, you know, I live right next door in Millbury, and I chair our Disability Commission, and, yeah, we actually read through our ADA plan, which, by the way, was done by my, you know, partner here by himself, you know, over 10 years ago. So, yeah, so we've been, you know, we've referred to that on, you know, many occasions, and you know, I encourage the Disability Commission here in, you know, Grafton to, you know, make sure, you use, use their expertise because at the end of the day, nobody knows, disability, better than someone that has a disability. And their input is definitely, paramount for stuff like this. And low-hanging fruit makes so much sense. I know that's what we always push.
I mean, it looks daunting when you look at it in totality, it looks like it's a huge, and it is, but if we can, we were supposed to do a transition plan in the nineties to get us to where we are now, so we put that off, we've done this, now we have this to make the plan, and then the community around this, the Disability Commission can help us drive that bus and meet
Absolutely.
Ed's goal of what's next.
All right, so if what's next is important to us, which of course it is. So if we have, Roger, the rebirth of that particular commission, we can give it a little bit of time next month to try to flesh out the membership, making sure we have a public, commission that's going to help us through this process, which would be nice. And then of course staff to support it, and then we can start picking through, start prioritizing things, finding that low-hanging fruit, and bring you back in before the select board, and then kind of going over it, or give you a nice length of time to go over what you found, and then how we want to proceed forward. So, I mean, I'm eventually it's going to come back to low-hanging fruit and what we can do in-house and some of the things we do over the course of the year with the budget restrictions we're going to have. But certainly when we start new projects, new parks, new whatever, like on the Common, we went back and forth on the brick thing ad nauseum, I think, and then we did the same thing at town meeting. So it's not built yet. I assume it's going to go out to design. Maybe this is something that we take another look at.
And just know that the town of Grafton's in Center for Living and Working's service area, so you would have access to either myself or other staff there for anything that is accessibility related. And I have already spoken to Roger, and told him he's welcome to contact me about reestablishing the Disability Commission, and because we've had our commission since like 2001, and just like any other new commission, we went to visit some other active ones to get an idea what we should be doing. So we're here to help. We're not going to disappear. After this meeting here.
Well, great. So how about we give Roger and everybody else, and then we have participation to the second meeting in August, and see where we're at. If it needs help and it's stalling or something like that, we'll give it the help it's needed.
Fill it with the 7 members. I've been working closely with some people that
Roger.
meet the criteria.
This is what I was going to have you just sit up here with us. Reiterate what you said, just so when this goes out there, people know what we said.
And I keep on forgetting I need the mic. No, I was simply saying that aside from the people that have already applied, I'm working closely with some people that do meet the preferred status, either people with a disability or family members with disabilities, to fill out that 7-member commission. So I'm pretty sure we'll have it filled. So.
All right. Good. So I'll have it on the agenda, the second meeting in August. We'll review it with the commission, and then we'll start moving forward with it. Thank you. Well, gentlemen, does anybody from the public at large have anything, any questions, concerns, or anything like that? All right, brilliant. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much again, and congratulations on your ADA self-evaluation transition plan.
Thank you very much for coming. I appreciate it.
You'll have to vote to establish that, appoint members next week.
Yeah.
That's pretty.
On the second, right? Is that, on second
Second
in
meeting in
Yeah.
August.
Yeah, to appoint the full membership, I assume.
That's fine.
All right, well, you were
We'll
talking
know
about
then if
talking
we
about
have
appointment.
enough people to
Oh, yeah.
make it.
Yeah, we gotta get enough applications in first.
Yeah.
right there.
And making sure it's got everything that we need, so that should be plenty of time to do that. And they can appoint and go right to it anyways, so we can appoint and then bring them up to speed on what our next step type of thing is. So. Alright, so, the next thing we have, Andy, would you come on up? I have the library, the DPW, and the cable building project updates. These are no particular order, so you just let us know which one you want to start with, and
Okay.
have some fun with it.
Do you-
One second, I'm getting there.
Okay. I have some slides.
Oh, brilliant! We can use our media.
I have some slides in there in the order that I wanted to go in. All right. Thanks. So we might as well just go right into cable. We're gonna go cable TV, library, then DPW. Cable TV, as you mentioned earlier, Bruce, they have just moved. So everything has been moved from the old studio to the new. And they're currently in the phase of sort of get everything out of boxes, plugging things back in, testing the equipment, and making sure they're up and running. So they'll be. I'm expecting they're going to be off the air for a few more days, but the move went well. So I've got some before and after pictures. So that's the studio. On the left-hand side is the former garage, and now on the right-hand side is basically what that studio looks like right now. All cleaned up. Next one is conference room. So what it was before, sort of in the middle of demolition, and where we are right now. That some of these photos are a little bit of a mess because I took them in the middle of the move. So there's boxes and crates and things in the way, but things are all looking good. So next one, again, when you come in through the entryway into the lobby, you can see what a mess it was before. We've got carpet, ceilings, everything all done. Data rack is in there right now, and coming back together. Things that would be unrecognizable from before. There wasn't a control room there before. There is now. The center one is classic shot of the bathroom. Those concrete bunkers, they're gone. And then the former office that was there in the sort of the curved part of the front of the building is an office again, but totally refurbished. So highlights again. So we're substantially complete with the project. We've gotten probably another week to go to do finalize punch list, touch up, things like that. Do final clean. We're going to do final clean around the move. The move is complete. We're bringing everything back up, and we did come in under budget slightly. Next. There's the budget. 1.1. We had some change orders, about 5%, which is pretty routine. I have to say the general contractor JJ Cardosi out of Rhode Island was fantastic to work with. This was not a huge project, but they gave us a superintendent that did a great job. Really took the job personally. Did some of his own handiwork, some of his own carpentry on it. They were very fair in terms of change orders and sort of making things wash out a little bit and I thought they were very, very fair. So kudos to those guys. They were great to work with. It's not always like that on Chapter 149 projects. So the schedule, again, we should be done by the end of the week, next week. Again, highlights. So moving on to that's the cable TV. I would also suggest anybody that wants to go and check it out. It's pretty amazing. I mean, I don't know whose idea it was to put the cable TV studio in that building, but it's a kind of a tough little building. There's not a lot of uses I could think of for it, but when you walk in there now, it's a cable TV studio. It's pretty. I mean, it's a funky little building, but we managed to make something good out of it. So that was a good adaptive reuse.
It's hard to believe it was a police department.
It is now.
It really is. I mean, I was thinking you could do post office maybe, but you had parking issues. It's a municipal campus. Cable was the only logical.
Yeah, I mean, the
thing
parking
to get.
works. The location couldn't be better. I don't know if there's a TV club, an AV club at the
There
high
is.
school or not, but couldn't be a better spot right in the middle of all this stuff.
That was
that's
part
going
of
on
the
right
thought
here.
process too.
Yeah.
The school.
It's good. So library, short and sweet. The highlight is the interim library that we moved over to St. Andrews is functioning pretty well. They're just barely enough room to squeeze them in there. We've got air conditioning going. They've got patrons are coming and going. The parking is tough, but they're making it work. But I think that interim library location was well worth the money. There are not a lot of options in town for where we could put the library on a temporary basis, and this is really kind of a home run in terms of being able to have, the library continue to function, to continue to provide all the services that it does. So I'm pretty pleased with the way that interim library move went and the way it's been functioning still. That was a good move. Challenges to the library project right now is just the design progress has been slow. We had originally wanted to start construction May 1st. It's going to be September 1st. We are going out to bid. We're advertising for bids starting this week, so those advertisements are going to go out, and we'll have bids in. I think on the next slide, the bids are going to be due at the end of August, so we'll start construction right after that in September, and go to the end of 2020. So that's the library. So DPW, again, some construction progress. I think we've been posting things pretty regularly, and we'll continue to do that on Facebook. The salt shed went up in a jiffy. Go ahead. Pretty boring stuff to look at right now in terms of the main building, underground utilities. Not super exciting, but we're paying attention to what's going on there. Pouring some more concrete this coming week. And the big fun really starts the first week of August when the structural steel and metal panels and roof start to arrive. That'll be going on for about a month and a half. So the highlights, again, salt shed's mostly there. Again, you can read it. So we're in pretty good shape in terms of where we need to be with the schedule. And again, August and September, you're going to see sort of the instant gratification portion of the program when all the steel goes up and this whole thing takes shape pretty quickly. Then it'll sort of slow down visually again when we're doing all the work inside. Challenges, again, we've talked about this before, that $400,000+ change order we had when we hit ledge was not a great day, but that's underground conditions in New England, I guess. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more going forward. Schedule, still good news, where the completion date is still mid-February of 2020. That hasn't changed. We've had some obstacles, certainly with the ledge, but we're still on track to finish per the contract. So that's good news. The other kind of news, just in terms of where we are with the budget. So the budget on top, the top line, the initial contingency we've talked about before. We went in really low with a low contingency of 3%. We did do with the change order, the large change order for $400,000, the team got together and did a lot of work to try and do some cost reduction. We looked at some of our assumptions for things like FF&E furniture and fixtures and equipment at the low voltage price that we are carrying, the budget that we were carrying for low voltage. There were probably 3 or 4 line items that we looked at and realized that we could probably reduce those down safely. And then part of that, the contingency being increased was we moved something like paving out of the project cost and moved that over to something that could be supported by highway stabilization. So it didn't go away in terms of what the town was looking at, but it gave us a little bit of breathing room in terms of contingency. So change orders all in, just over $500,000. That ledge change order by itself is 80% of that. We have had some change orders to credit, so that was part of our cost reduction work with the team, was to find ways to save some money, so that netted us over $100,000 in credit there. So our current contingency that we're carrying forward to the end of the project right now is $230,000 and $540. So that's a relatively safe amount given where we are with the project. We're almost completely out of the ground. Everything that's left after that is stuff that we can see that's under our control. So I feel pretty good about what we're going to see for change orders going forward. We've always said since the beginning of this thing that getting out of the ground was going to be the struggle.
Right.
And it has been. just in the Wayback Machine for a moment, when we bid this out, we broke out some alternates to make sure that we could actually get this project rolling under budget with the way that the bidding came in. This was just a hedge to make sure that we didn't just lump it all together and we're over budget and couldn't go. So we broke out some alternates. The salt shed, we're using stabilization money for the full building. Footprint is part of the project. We decided, ultimately, we put the salt shed canopy and the fuel canopy down at the very bottom because there were low priorities that could be done in the future. And then the industrial equipment just didn't make the cut with what we had for bid pricing. However, that industrial equipment is, it's integral to the operation of the building. So the intent was that we were going to use some combination of contingency, leftover contingency, and other savings from the project, usually buyout savings that you can get pulled together to purchase the equipment at the end of the project. Again, that alternate 3 for industrial equipment was right around $500,000. The issue with that, of course, is that our contingency now is not what it should have been because we had that $400,000 hit. So go ahead. The news just keeps getting better. So the existing gas pump at the former police station is aging out. Our consultant that watches, that inspects underground tanks has told us it needs to be replaced by the end of 2020. That's the bad news. The good news is we had designed a gas pump to be next to the diesel pump at the DPW station. So we have the ability to add that in. It was something that was part of the design, but not part of the budget. We had never included that. So the current estimate for that gas pump equipment and the removal of the existing tank and pump is that number is $260,000. And then lastly, the paving I had mentioned before, that was part of our effort to bring back some contingency to be able to get past the ledge removal issue. That still is sitting out there. So the paving to pave the area around the DPW, the new facility, is about $170,000. So if you look at all this stuff together, that's a pretty big number. It's the industrial equipment. Again, that industrial equipment is things. It's not like some nice to have racks and things like that. It's hardcore. Like we got to lift up vehicles to maintain them. It's exhaust systems. It's wash bay stuff to keep vehicles clean. So the industrial equipment is all really necessary stuff. The gas pump is really not specifically related to the DPW project, except that we did design for it in the future. It seems that the future is almost now. And then the paving we had shuttled outside of the direct project cost and put it into highway stabilization. So that's sitting out here as well. So that's all the news I have for you.
You can back out
Fortunately,
the $230K that you have in contingency remaining, so it's
Correct.
a little over 700,000.
right.
What was the total estimated project cost? Remind me, what were we?
Just over
13 and change.
just 13 and change. Yeah.
13 change.
Yeah.
Go back a couple.
That's what we went out to
Right.
ask for.
So it's like 6% over. Okay.
Right.
And when you said stabilization before, we didn't mean our municipal stabilization or town stabilization. We used Chapter 90 funds essentially.
Right.
So, just for clarification for people at home.
You're good.
So yeah, sorry to bring the bad news, but I'm here for the good and the bad. So I gotta tell you, give you the unvarnished truth.
We appreciate it.
Yep.
So we'll have to work some numbers to bring back to the board, because we'll have to find a way to get the 760 or 780, or if you wanna round it up, to make that work, whether it's road stabilization, Chapter 90, free cash. There's gonna be a combination of things that we're gonna have to undertake in October to make the project roll until completion, especially if we wanna do the gas tank. That it works here. Diesel fuel is always, we put that above ground, we redid the DPW barn, we put that above ground, we're moving that tank, all
Yep.
that stuff's coming with us.
Correct.
So we move forward thinking in that. This underground unleaded fuel that's at the police department is underground, single wall tank, doesn't leak, thank God, but it needs to be decommissioned and moved up there as well. But the timing of that is just, we have to do it because it's going to age out, we might as well do it now. So a lot of the cost in that 260 number is all of the conduit, all of the base, all the pouring, all the steel, not necessarily the tank. But we don't want to dig up that area twice, so that's part of that. Probably 210 of that 260 has to be, infrastructure needs to be worked on now while the ground is open.
Right, we have talked about some of the details of this stuff, and we could probably do a little bit more. We're gonna continue to take a look at some of this stuff, even just the industrial equipment. You know, originally it was an alternate to do that through the general contractor. We could, and I think we probably should, purchase that ourselves at the end of the project. They don't get their chunk of the cost that way, and we'd have to manage it, but we're gonna have to manage it anyway.
So I would say, just in the benefit of time,
Yep.
I would guess that over the next few weeks, this dialogue is gonna continue.
Mhm.
Narrowing down, finding out exactly how much of the 700 and how much contingency we're gonna have on the 700.
Yep.
To include, to make sure we don't come back a third time for some more money.
Right.
So, just for awareness, this is all have to money. So we spent $13 million and asked for money to complete this project, and this is what we need to actually complete the project. So it's not like we can hack stuff out of this, it's not like we can cut down size now or things of that nature. This is just kind of the way it is.
Right. Not that we're not looking at that, again, just for the equipment's sake, we have looked at, we've got a list of everything that needs to go into the building, and we have looked at that to see if there's things that we can prioritize. Unfortunately, there's stuff that could potentially be prioritized lower, doesn't move the needle at all,
Right.
you know?
So why don't we circle back, and Tim, how much time are you gonna need to put together some funding sources, and Andy to put together some more concrete numbers?
Well, I think, so recommendations for you, I think the numbers are fairly concrete. We just gotta figure
We're
out,
gonna continue to work on some of them, but the numbers that we have right here are good. They're,
Yeah, I'm just saying, when we have a discussion on this and we look at all the funding sources we have available, because I assume this is gonna be October town meeting, if we gotta, spend money, that's where we're gonna do it. We're not gonna wait till next spring or have a special.
Right.
So that puts us on some type of a deadline.
definitely.
And for us to deliberate on the policy moving forward with how we want to approach it going into October, that's gonna take some time as well.
Yep.
So it's not gonna happen tonight, but, I wanna make sure that when we have that discussion, we go October, that, we don't appropriate 700,000 and have it come in and have a 18,000-pound lift come in at whatever.
Right.
And we only went in here, so this 700 has to have its own contingency.
Correct.
And that money, of course, can come back in when we're done. So
Right.
figure a month, we can come back
Or-
again that second meeting in August, and we can have a
Yep.
legitimate discussion on funding sources.
We'll come
Is that
back.
okay with everybody?
Yeah,
Okay.
that makes sense.
Great.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Andy.
All right, breezing through some appointments. Election worker,
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Carlson.
I motion that we appoint Mary Preston as an election worker.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Mary. And then we have a affirmation of an administrator appointment.
Mr. Chair, I move the board vote to affirm the appointment of David Kraus as temporary part-time employee of the sewer department.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. Welcome back to municipal work, David.
he's limited for retirement purposes. We're gonna cap him at like 760.
All right, and then, at the request of, I think, Finance Committee, and, I think Ed brought it up as well, we went back out and we went out to bid for our auditing services. It had been some time, and, the competitive bid was who is currently us, so to speak, Mr. Scanlon's office, Scanlon and Associates. So unless anybody has any, comments or concerns, we can re-sign that contract.
Becca,
You need
could-
both separately?
I'm sorry?
Is it both separately in here to be signed, so the contract and the
There's an
letter of
engagement letter for the chair to sign, and there's a contract for the full board
Alright.
to sign.
I move the board vote to sign the auditing contract with Scanlon and Associates for fiscal years ending June 30th, 2019, 2020, and 2021.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, what was the process? You guys had, how many responses to putting it out for bid?
Cool.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. I wrote the RFP, sent it to members of the finance committee, took their comments, incorporated some of them into the RFP, put it out. We received 4 responses. We sent the responses to the finance committee. We met with 2 members of finance committee to review all the responses, along with myself, Amy Perkins, who's a treasurer collector, and Anita Patel. And we all pretty much came to the same conclusion, that Scanlon was the best proposal, along with the best price. Obviously, in an RFP, you can't consider price until after you've done the evaluation. There was some interest in Powers and Sullivan from one member of the finance committee. However, they were also the most expensive. And after learning of that, that member did agree that Scanlon would be the best choice.
Okay. I mean, I'm not excited about it. You know, Sean, with some prompting, was in here a couple of years ago reminding us that we weren't running a structural deficit. And his justification for that opinion, he said, well, you're not using one-time money. Well, which is true, except that we had an override and we had levy capacity, so we didn't need to. So I don't know whether or not, you know, that was an opinion just born out of being an accountant and looking at 1 year at a time, or whether there was an extent to which he was telling people what he thought they wanted to hear, which I think is much worse. I don't want to be told what somebody thinks I want to hear, you know, and as Andy just said, he's here to tell us the whole truth, the good and the bad. So I find that helpful, but, you know, this is what the recommendation is, so here we are.
Did you say Sean?
Tom.
Sean,
Tom.
was it? Oh, Tom,
Tom.
I'm sorry, I misheard you.
Tom.
Well, yeah. You're talking about Tom Scanlon, the
Yeah,
article.
Yeah,
I
I'm
thought you
sorry.
said Sean, so
Yeah,
Yeah, I think because I know a Sean Scanlon, I'm
all
sorry,
right,
Yeah.
my fault.
We all got any further discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries, and then I'll need a motion for me to sign the letter of intent, or whatever it's called.
Engagement.
I move the board vote to authorize the chair to sign
Engagement.
the letter of engagement.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
I will go ahead and sign that. Pass these around a second. Okay. Now, we have, fire apparatus, vote to sign a lease purchasing agreement for a 750 gallon pumper truck, which we have here. And then we also have a memo that we just received, well, a few days ago anyways, from Chief Gauthier, concerning, the next piece. So, we have our, the two are kind of just, I want to put them in the same area. I know it's correspondence, but I just, while we're talking about buying this, or, well, having already bought this anyways, then moving on to, just giving a couple seconds to go through the correspondence.
So can I just want to elaborate a little bit. We had the EVR study done for equipment and recommendations every year. This is a deviation from that. That's
Yep.
gave rise to the memo. So you have a lease agreement in front of you to purchase this gallon tanker, 250 gallon tanker. And we did an analysis and talked to the banking, you know, David Eisenthal, to figure out, well, do we borrow for this? Do we just do a lease purchase? And we ultimately landed on a lease purchase for a 7-year option of $103,279 for annual payments over those, over that 7-year period,
Which is this.
which is that.
Very similar to what we did previously.
Just the vacuum
Yeah.
tank.
We did the univents this way, and we did one other project
Street
this way
sweeper.
as well.
And an
Thank you.
engine.
Yep, those are the three
Oh, heavy
things that went through CIPC through
Yeah,
a
same.
lease program.
I don't know.
Okay, is everybody comfortable with this lease purchasing agreement? Alright.
Need a motion.
I do.
I move the board vote to authorize the chairman to sign the contract with Seagrave Fire Apparatus LLC.
Second.
Any discussion on this contract before
Yeah,
us?
I'll have to write the option.
You all set? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Hearing, okay. So that passes, we have that contract. Now, just, seeing that you all came out for this, and you have this memo,
You need to sign the financing agreement, if you don't mind. We
oh,
do
I
that
gotta
first
sign that
before we
one
get into
myself
that.
too. All right,
I'd
yeah,
recommendation.
please.
Two things
Okay,
to
great.
decide?
Mr. Chair, I move the board vote to authorize the chairman to sign the finance agreement for Seagrave Model TB50CA Marauder Pumper Fast Track.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those, I'll sign this as well. Alright. So that's that. And then. Alright, just bear with me, Chief, 2 seconds. Alright, so anyways, we got this memo, and it's a deviation from it. It is correspondence, but seeing that we have the chief here, we'll read the correspondence, kind of get your understanding of this, so just moving forward, we have, when we get to our next, when we actually have an official discussion on whether we want to deviate from these type of things. So just briefly, put us in your perspective, give us some homework to do, so to speak.
The deviation between going for that 55-foot ladder, that,
Yeah, what you provided to us in a memo.
sure. We as a committee, we felt that a 55-foot ladder doesn't serve the town a good purpose. I mean, it doesn't have the reach. A lot of times you can't get close to a house. So we have trouble sometimes with our 95-foot tower to reach a building. So we felt the 55-foot wasn't gonna be feasible to us. We have a 75-foot ladder in the town of Sutton in Wilkes, less than 2 miles from our current fire station. That's on our current run card, so we have a second ladder coming. So if we were to go with a 75-foot ladder, you're limited to what you can carry for water, which is 500 gallons or less. You're limited to what you can carry for hose, and different things. So if we had a car fire down in the south end of town, I'd have to call another engine company in because I don't have enough water to put out the car fire. So now I'm taxing 2 companies where the engine that we've always had in the south end can do that. We have a tower coming right behind us. Because anything out of this headquarters district for a structure fire, the tower's the first truck to leave out of headquarters, so it would be technically the second truck in. So it gets to the front of the building. And we just felt that it wasn't feasible to spend up to $900,000 for a piece of equipment that we didn't need. We felt 638 was fair. It's gonna serve us for 25 years. And I did a survey out of District 7 out of 25 communities. Nobody has a 55-foot ladder. There's one town, the town of Oxford, they bought 15 years ago. They don't use it. It just wasn't feasible to them. It sits in a garage and does nothing. So we felt, I mean, if the city, if this was such a good piece of equipment, why doesn't like the city of Worcester have one, or these other bigger communities have one? They're just not feasible.
Right, and the 55-foot ladder, just, that's the next one, so to speak.
That was to replace our engine 3. That was the EVR's report. That was a recommendation, and we felt that it wasn't a good fit for the town of Grafton. And it was a lot of money to spend for something that really wasn't a good fit.
And did you look at that one specifically because it was kind of next in line, or did you?
Yes.
Did you take another composite of the way the list? Because when we first had that list before us, there was some argument on, the order or the precedent, what we should be.
Well, I think the argument back then was over the tanker,
Right.
and
What-
we solved that
But
issue.
that leads me to the point when we talked about it last time is we have no overall funding mechanism for any of this.
Right.
So it's hard from my perspective to take it truck by truck. If that's going to be our approach, that should be our approach. If it's to look at it like if we're going to go out and buy 4 trucks, say we decided we want to go out and bond $2 million for fire apparatus to stage them over the next, it takes so long for these
Right.
things to get built. And if it's imperative for us to have them, we should be looking at these things. It's a public safety issue, et cetera, et cetera. Need to take a deeper look at the list, because if we're gonna have this argument for every single truck, and we do decide we wanna have a funding source that's gonna buy 5 trucks.
No, I mean,
on the
that
list.
was the biggest deviation we really had, was with this 55-foot. Because looking at the EVR report now, and submitting my capital budget, in 2022 is to replace my engine 1, which is right on their report. And then it's 2 years that we go without a major piece, and 2025 is to replace the tower.
I have a question for the chief. Can you remind me again, in that report, that capital apparatus report replacement schedule, did they consider neighboring towns that are call, that participate in mutual aid with what they have for equipment?
No.
And how they respond?
No.
So they were looking at that report as though we were insolent and we did not use any other,
They use it as what we have for equipment and what we have for aging equipment, and to keep that same equipment
Yeah.
up to date.
Okay, so that your analysis is that you're reviewing mutual aid services that come to our aid, and this being on your card, your call card,
Right, on a ladder, I mean, a ladder truck is a specialty piece.
yes.
So, I mean, if you look at all the communities, there's only one place in central Mass that has more than one ladder, and that's the city of Worcester. So, I mean,
Okay.
it's just a specialized piece to have 2 of those in this community. It's a lot of money to spend where you're not gonna use it like,
I guess what I would say, I'm kind of agreeing, I am agreeing with you, not kind of, I'm agreeing with the analysis that the committee has put forth in this memo, because I wasn't realizing, and I just wanted to validate that report was looking at the town as just the town, not,
as far as I know, I mean, they weren't looking at anybody else, so.
Yeah, I'd have to look, chief, because I know they talked to other chiefs out
Right.
the area. I don't know if they inventoried what other folks had, but it would make sense that they would know from a mutual aid perspective. So they looked at aging equipment, they looked at the call volume that you have, and then replacing in kind as much as possible, unless there's a better methodology. And some of it, I think, was based on what's surrounding, but I'd have to look at the methodology.
that's why I brought the question up. 'cause
I
it's-
think
a good
what
question.
really set us back though was 6 years for this tanker. If you think back, I mean, it was more than 6 years we were trying to get this truck and the money wasn't available. So it just kept backing up some pieces. So now we're in that situation where it seems like we're getting a truck every year. You know, we just finished paying off the rescue.
It's the same approach. It's
Right.
It's
And that was
becoming
5 years.
systematic of the approach of the town for a long time. Like when we had a discussion on ADA compliance, this was something in the '90s that would have cost a fraction of what it's going to cost us now.
Exactly.
Especially all the building that we've done in those couple decades. Now we're finally getting around to doing something that we really have to be compliant with. Fire apparatus is the same thing. So
Yeah.
you can only put this type of stuff off for so long. But when we do approach it, just heard 2 seconds ago, we're going to be $700,000 short on a facility that we've already committed $13 million to. That money's got to come from somewhere too. So when we start talking about these things, and we just have to have that broad perspective, because eventually something's got to give, because we don't have this type of free cash.
Oh, I know.
We're going to run out of lease space with free cash. We're going to run out of levy capacity. All those things are going to grind to a pretty significant halt, especially coming up into this next year. What's your timeline for this? So that would be your next capital. This is the next truck you want, and I say you, and I mean the town.
Right.
So queuing it up. This is not something. This be like next spring. We'll be looking this for the capital plan type of thing. So we have some time to digest this, and
Not for this truck he just signed a lease for, that'll be built now.
I know, but
Yes.
the first payment allocation will be made at next.
Yeah, yes,
At
yes.
next spring's time.
no, I'm talking
think he's
about
talking
when we
about
have a
the project.
discussion on the ladder
Oh,
truck.
okay.
Oh, right, that'll be in 2025.
All right.
Okay.
We got a little time to work with here.
Oh, absolutely. So like,
There's
Like I
another
was just-
piece to buy before that.
what's that?
Yeah, one more piece
yeah,
to buy before that.
Yeah, in
But yeah,
2022 would
the
be,
options are the lease option that we've been going with.
I think is the best, the
Yeah,
only way we can do it.
or we can exclude it and
Right.
just be ready to go every year to replace those, and we can
Right.
certainly do that.
I want to look at everything, but we got a whole bunch on our plate for the next 6 months. I just want to make sure that we give it its due time. We make sure we continue
Oh,
to
yeah,
look at.
well,
those,
this
but-
money was already appropriated this past town meeting for
For one
2020.
payment.
For the one, for the
For,
first
for
pack.
the
For,
first
for the
payment.
one we just,
Yeah.
yeah,
For the one you just signed.
yeah.
I'm talking about looking at the rest of the apparatus as we plan out the next couple
Oh,
of
I know.
years.
Like I said, in 2022 is the next big expense of the engine one.
Which is
Just
not that far away.
To make everything fit in a budget, you know, you.
Oh, I
you cannot
understand.
Debt exclude stuff or continue to make lease payments, and we've got to make a determination as to, you know, big picture, you know, how are we gonna, because we don't wanna make you guys
I
wait
just tell
another
you
6
the
years,
needs
like I
that we
said.
need to do the job,
Yeah,
and if the funding's not there, I understand that, but I mean,
Okay.
so.
All right.
thank you,
Chief.
All right.
appreciate it.
All right, let's see, Board of Selectmen, or rather, Select Board reports. Does anybody have anything for us?
I just have something in relation to correspondence, but I can.
I just said that, we'll be meeting, the Grafton Sustainability Commission will be meeting tomorrow night for the first time, the executive portion of it up in conference room E at 7 o'clock.
All right. Jen, anything?
No.
And then yours is under correspondence.
Yes.
Well,
All right, so TA report.
I will be brief. Just a reminder, and you already know this, that we're offline. We're not running live tonight. Not that anybody can hear me outside this room, but I was gonna announce it just to you all, so if you got text saying you're not on TV, here we are. Couple things we've been working on, the Safe Routes to School program. We talked about that last meeting. There's a project initiation form that's due on the 26th. I'm working with Tony LeMay and the state DOT's consultant on that. Tomorrow, staff's meeting internally to talk about the capital needs and the operational needs for 21 through 25. So that data will go into the capital long-range plan. And then on Monday, the 22nd at 6, we're gonna have an external capital summit at Tufts. We've had that information on Facebook for a couple, maybe 2 weeks now. And we may end up scheduling other additional dates if necessary. But we plan on providing the information we come up with tomorrow to listen to the community on what they think the priority should be and if there's anything we didn't include on our list. So it's more of just an information gathering and a listening event for us and for staff. You also may have noticed that a lot of construction work we try to put out on Facebook, that K-Circle, all of Comfort Point behind the Extra Mart, that whole area was supposed to be resurfaced and repaved starting this week. They had an equipment malfunction, I guess, that's what the word we got from the contractor was, so that won't start until next week, but we did have signage, we did a reverse 911 text, email scenario, and asked people to talk to their neighbors about the construction activity that'll happen there. So Brian's been great in terms of coordinating that effort, but we were gonna start on K, hopefully tomorrow, then be in that Comfort Point subdivision soon thereafter, and then we'll do the rest of the streets on the list before the summer is out. The ramp projects, you'll notice when you came in, they're underway. We talked about that a little bit. The front of the building had a fiber that came into this building from Verizon and a gas line that we unearthed. No damage, no disruption in service. We met with utilities today to solve that problem, so we did obviously dig safe it, but they did not capture it. So we hit it.
How far was it down?
Below, just above frost. One was a little higher than the other. Verizon line was higher than the gas line.
Was the gas
But
line
it-
at least 2.5 feet down for?
And you could, I can bring you over there. You can look at it. I don't know what the depth is.
What?
Jump in and measure it.
We'll have to get you a trench permit before we put you in there.
What I'm saying is that if it's not in the place it's supposed to be, DigSafe did not find it. Perhaps there's other lengths of that pipe that we need to investigate to make sure if we do, like I mentioned before, parking over on the side of it or wherever it's coming in, that we don't unearth it again in another segment of it.
Yeah, to the front of the building, yes.
Anything we do
Yep.
there.
Well, we were diligent. We asked the right company.
You didn't blow
to
up this time.
ask.
I would just in case 10 years down the road, then we had the same discussion and somebody did blow up. That's we had the opportunity to make sure we knew everywhere it was. So it's not often that DigSafe, and I work with them a lot,
Yeah.
or did as of a year ago. And they've usually
They've never
pretty dead
missed?
on. They've never missed. No.
Well, thankfully we didn't break it, so that's good. Just a reminder, National Night Out is the 6th. We still are planning all of our staff to go out there and prevent programs and opportunity to meet department heads and so forth at National Night Out. MJ Market, you might recall, you signed an agreement with them. They have to go through a process through the CCC to have a public outreach meeting. They are going to use our gym on August 1st, which is a Thursday at 2 p.m. to hold that outreach event, which is required under the CCC. So
Picking a great time to do it, to bring as many people in as possible, I'm sure.
that's the time they requested. They think that meets their requirement to do the.
It all meets the
notice?
requirement
Yeah.
to do it,
Yeah.
so.
So I figured I would announce it as much as possible if people are interested. The second Grafton Youth Police Academy graduation is the 19th of July at 2 p.m. in the training room at the police department. So the police department has offered an invitation to the select board and to myself to attend if anybody wants to go, Friday the 19th at 2 o'clock. A couple other quick points. We are working on the old DPW facility to find its highest and best use. We applied with the help of Joe Layden for a grant through Mass Development. We were awarded $35,000 to figure out the highest and best use for the redevelopment of that site. So we have that grant in hand. We will probably hire a group like Dodson Flickner, like we did for the Bolac property, and we did the site tour, and we walked around, did a visioning session to figure out what people would want to see at that location. So we will do that again with the help of that grant. Airport Park, that equipment we talked about, and we had a lot of people that had a lot of anxiety about that. Playground equipment's been installed. All the mulch, unfortunately, the mulch is not the optimum thing to use, has been deployed, but not to 100%. There's still a large pile in the parking lot. So we're working on that as we go. And then Wyman Gordon, 29 acres, I don't have any particular insight into where they're moving in terms of the development of that, but I can tell you they made application to the building department today to decouple the water main to feed the building for fire service, which means that's just a logistical step in severing the parcel off for development. So I think that's a good step, a step in the right direction to get that parcel redeveloped for commercial development for the front parcel. And then finally, I sent an email to the chair relative to the Prentice Place project. We're gonna have a meeting here on the 24th with the developer and the attorney to talk about next steps, because as you know, Sargon, when he was chair, attended the mediation sessions that we had. So we're gonna have another strategy meeting on the 24th at 11. So I don't know if the board wants someone else to attend that or no one, but we'll be there from a staff perspective. But if the board wants the chair to attend or someone else.
And I asked you to bring this up just so
Yeah.
we made sure we remember it. So Sargon did, of course, go to the last one. I would be more than happy to go. My schedule is rather in flux over the next few weeks. So if we could have another designee that could represent the board there, because I think we want somebody there.
What time's it at?
11 a.m.
On the
24th.
24th?
I think it's Tuesday, right?
Wednesday. Next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday. So I can tentatively go now, but if something comes up at the last minute, which very well happen over the next couple of weeks for me, I just want to be able to give somebody a phone call and have them go in my stead.
Next one's at 24th. I mean, I'm supposed to be in a deposition, but
You're no.
yeah, I'm a no.
I'm planning to be in Grafton that day, so I might be able to swing that. How long do you think it might last?
The topics are wide varying, so probably 2 hours.
Okay, 11 to 1. I can make that work.
Okay. Does that fine?
It's fine,
with
if
everybody?
Peter does it.
Then just put me in just tentatively going, and then I'll call Mr. Carlson if I can't, something comes up at the last minute. Thanks for bringing that up. I
And
appreciate
that's all I have for the board.
I have just a quick question for you. Did, we close on the Pine Street property on the 5th yesterday?
No,
Oh, okay.
no, the title
Isn't that
work
the
is still
date?
being done, but it'll
Okay.
happen. And Ginny was here today. I didn't even ask her if she followed up with the state, but it'll happen. I'm hoping by the end of next week for that closing.
Okay, thank you.
it. Were you able to, get with Brian or, Paul and talk about, getting some prices together for,
Yep.
Extending that? Can you have that for the next meeting just to look at?
I don't know if I will have it. Did Paul leave me? Yeah, I asked them when we had the first meeting, but with vacations and everything else, they haven't got me a price. We know we're putting in 9 spaces on the front, on both ends here, and then we can certainly get the price. I just don't know if I'll have them for your next meeting.
Why don't we just, in the first meeting in September, how about that,
Okay, I can do that.
just as a deadline for it?
All right.
Thank you. All right, now correspondence.
No, yes, thank you. So as the Board of Selectmen's representative to the Grafton Fire Department Study Committee, we've had 2 meetings, and yesterday we made some substantial gains in just how we feel prioritization of reviewing that intensive report on the department. And there were a couple of items that had come up yesterday that I felt should probably be brought to the board's attention on behalf of the committee. And they wanted me to convey to you that, out of the list that I provided in that memo that we decided on yesterday, those 10, 11 priorities, that there are 3 of them that we feel should be brought to our attention now and not wait for a final report that is going to occur in the next few months or 6 months, at that matter. So the board recognizes, the importance of everything on the list that was outlined in that report, but we feel that the few most critical issues is that in order to foresee any of this implementation from the report, we feel that there needs to be a full-time qualified administrator at that level, because right now we have part-time chief in the position today, but really what we felt is necessary is that a position needs to be budgeted and created for full-time in that capacity. In addition to that, it was also brought to our attention, that was also kind of mentioned in the report, but there's staffing, recruitment, and retention. And yesterday, several of the captains from a couple of the stations reported that they've had a decrease in membership, and that this is becoming a problem because they're having less and less qualified firefighters, or trained firefighters to be able to respond to fires. So one of the things that they really would like to see the board emphasize and have start sooner rather than later is really kind of a staffing, recruitment, and retention program start up today. Start advertising in the paper about, joining the call fire department. If you're interested, please reach out and contact us. That sort of thing, and really get the public aware that there are some open slots that have grown over the years. So in other words, we're not closing the gap on what they feel should be adequate and fully staffed. If anything, it's increasing over time. And as you can well aware, we only appoint, I've only seen in the past year maybe 1 firefighter to the department, and I know we've lost I was told that we lost a few over the past few months. And last but not least, but obviously something I think everyone near and dear is training. So I know that we don't, there's no full-time administrator, that's at the chief level. There's a part-timer there, and with the assistance of Cheryl, but really they should, have an emphasis on training and really formalize that and start that, and not wait for a final report to come out saying, oh yeah, we should be doing training. So we felt that out of the 10 or 11 or so priorities, that we felt that it should come to this board's attention, that we feel that those 3 should be just started to be worked on right now and not wait any more time. So on behalf of the committee, I asked them if there was any availability for them to come in and maybe answer some questions after you guys read this memo, and everyone agreed that they could make it on August 20th if there's any additional questions. And really we want to focus on those top priority components, but the rest of the things that are in that priority list, for example, one of them is, develop a mission, vision, and values. We feel that those types of things could be worked on. They're not really what we figure a critical component of what we need for the department's sustainability, but is something that could be worked on kind of on the back end and be done not as a high priority, but can be done kind of in parallel with everything else. So anyway, I just wanted to bring this to your attention at the meeting tonight and get this to you sooner rather than later. So if anyone has any questions, I can bring back to the committee. I know I've got one of the members here today, Dan's here. So if there's anything that anyone has, if not, we can bring them here on the 20th.
The 20th of August is what you're talking about.
Yes.
Okay. That's fine.
20th of August it is.
So is this board giving our staff direction to start the process for finding a chief, or are we going to talk about that on the 20th?
The committee didn't go as far as saying what that position needs to be, like a full-time chief,
Okay.
or is it, there's a full-time assistant chief, or whatever it may be, but, you know, the board recognizes that, you know, it's very limited staffing at the fire department, and a lot of these things that need to be undertaken really require full-time attention. So we felt that we would rather see us describe to the town administrator and to the board of selectmen that, you know, there's really a need for a full-time qualified administrator at that level that can oversee an implementation of a lot of these components in this report that we're gonna be finally reporting on. So we figured by the time that that gets adequately budgeted and by the time that that may be agreed upon, that, you know, we didn't want to really wait.
So we're not giving, staff direction right now, we're gonna talk about it on the 20th and all together with the
Yes.
committee? Okay, that's just getting clarification.
Any other correspondence?
I just want to answer a couple of those concerns.
Sure, chief.
Yes, we've lost a few firefighters in the last few weeks and due to people moving. We also have 5 applicants that we're gonna be interviewing. So we have that. We also have a training program that's gonna be starting in September. I mean, we're limited to money, so I mean, we can only do one monthly training each month, cause that's all the money I have for instructors. If I tried to do a full-blown, training program, it was gonna cost $46,000 just for the instructors. We couldn't do that. I have $7,600 to do that. So we have to tailor that down. So I can only do what I have the money for. So, that's where we're at.
Okay.
Okay,
So I just wanted to update you on that.
Of course.
appreciate it.
Thanks, chief.
Thank you.
And not to, if I could, we're trying to hire for Steve Echaris. So, I mean, it's a timely discussion, because I have a gentleman that they're recommending to me that I was gonna call him today, Courtney Manning, and have a discussion, to kinda interview him over the phone after you guys have already recommended him to me, but he's the person who's gonna replace Steve. If the committee's gonna recommend something different from the board, and the board wants to take that action, I don't necessarily wanna hire him and then have us go in a different direction, and I'm hiring someone else, and I certainly don't have enough money to do both.
So
So
can
if
it
I
wait
may,
until
I
the,
think on the if I may, Mr. Chair, the 20th is really, if those are the concerns that come up, I believe that the whole of the committee can be available to maybe express, you know, how it felt about that. I don't want to speak on behalf of them or misspeak on, you know, where I could incorrectly interpret what was said, but part of that fire prevention component, that does the permitting and the inspections, was discussed, but I figured if that's a question that needs to come up, that I think on the 20th might be a more appropriate time to maybe address that.
Yeah, but I don't wanna bring that recommendation for you for ratification, if you might go in a different direction.
But I have a
Okay,
different
so-
perspective on that. I mean,
either way,
we have to do inspections every day.
give me
But-
just 1 second.
So, what I'm saying is, I mean, right now, Steve's working part-time. He has more inspections to do than he was when he was working full-time. I also have Captain Elaine assisting, cause he's out of school for the summer, and he's doing 5 or 6 a day. But, what I'm saying is, we do need a full-time inspector, because we still have to do the schools, we still have to get all the 26Fs, we have commercial stuff going on, we have plan reviews that have to get done. There's more work now than there ever was.
Alright.
So, that's a necessity,
Okay.
cause that's day-to-day operations, because people are calling Tim's office, cause they can't get an inspection.
Yeah, and we triage that, but let me ask this question, since you're here, I mean, no matter what, a chief or this inspectional services person, would they both have to, would you need them both anyways?
Eventually, you're gonna need them both, I mean, it's,
I tell you what, so we're
But-
going a little bit past where I wanna see this discussion go as a matter of just correspondence. I mean, we
Okay.
spend a lot of time and a lot of initiative on a fire study committee. If this can wait till August 20th, so we can actually deliberate on this and have some back and forth and go through the things,
I just don't wanna wait so long and then we lose this person, because,
then if times of the necessity, then the August 20th date actually doesn't work, can we move it up from that, or is that when?
cause we did the job interviews. Yeah, we did a second round of interviews, and we did that on June 27th, when we interviewed.
Chief, I want to be very clear. Nowhere did I say in my disclosure, in my memo, anything about the fire inspector's position, whether that should be delayed.
I'm asking that, I'm
he's-
sorry. I'm
No,
not
I
trying to
understand that, but I'm just saying, it's very important.
Yeah,
That's an
we're-
everyday,
It's an interesting point. We have, from Tim's position, we have a position that we're gonna go ahead and fill that we've interviewed for, because there's a direct need for it now. And a few months back, we had a fire study committee that we commissioned to take a look at a report. And so if we did have a full-time chief, inspectional services would probably be part of that portfolio. That would be his or her position to accommodate for. So it's a legitimate concern and discussion that we need to have. I just don't want to preempt something that we spent a lot of time and diligence trying to put together.
no, I
So
understand
if
that,
it
but
can
I'm
wait
just
till
saying,
August 20th, if it can't, then we have to have a separate discussion on that when we meet next, which is.
I mean, Steve's here, he can explain more to you of all the stuff that he does every day, you know? And he's working Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, he's working 12 hours a week.
Yeah, I just want to be careful how much we deliberate on a discussion when we affect policy without any public discourse. That's
I
that's
understand
what
that, but I'm just trying to make that point, that
All
the
right,
inspectional service is is a priority in this department, because they have to get done.
If you had your druthers,
What's that?
if you had your druthers this hire, how quickly? I mean, I know you're gonna say tomorrow, but can it be the next meeting before we get into deliberation?
Well, the person I recommended, just for logistics sake, I know you were asking him,
Yeah.
but the person can't start for 6 to 8 weeks once I make the offer.
Okay,
So
okay.
I'm further delayed.
So, right, so the farther we go,
Yeah.
the longer it takes.
Okay.
And then I don't know how interested he really is if I
Right,
wait
so
until the 20th. So
If he doesn't take the job, then we gotta start from square one
So
again.
just briefly, Rick, we're just going over scheduling now. So if you could,
Yeah, so I just want to clarify a couple things. I know, Peter, we went over this last night because we had our meeting last night for the board, the group. So the priorities that he showed you is just how the committee has decided last night what order we're gonna take them in and come with recommendations or questions that you have. The inspector was never ever part of that discussion. We knew that was happening. Our main goal was, that as soon as Tim can let us know, the board, the committee know that the inspector is in place, which we agree is top priority, we can move on to the next priority. Cause that is, right now, that is top priority. Chief said that at the first meeting in February, when they presented it, he said that is top priority because Steve is retired. So, we're all in agreement with that. We're all in agreement that that is top priority. The rest of it is in order of how we're gonna attack it.
all right,
So
thanks.
so when we come back, next time you have questions on any of those things that Pete listed, that's how we're gonna do
The
it.
20th is purely past the point of inspectional
Yes.
services. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so,
I just have one quick
Yeah.
question for Peter. When's your next meeting, in case we wanna attend?
Well, we meet on the first and third Tuesdays of every month, but given the time frame of August 20th, we are meeting on the 24th.
You're meeting
Tuesdays.
August 24th?
No,
No, July 24th?
I'm sorry. Let me reiterate. We're meeting on the 29th. We're meeting on the 5th. And the 19th.
8 and
you're
19th.
basically, you're picking nights where you can get all the attendance type of thing.
Okay. Just in case people wanna attend, I might wanna go,
Just looking at his
and
schedule.
it's 7 PM at,
7 p.m. here at the municipal center at the
Okay.
second floor school department conference room.
school department, okay,
Okay,
thank you.
so, we have somebody interested in inspectional services.
they have TV in that room?
Steve is retired now you've been retired for what, about 3-4 years now? And continuing to work.
Isn't that part of the charge? It's part of your charge, I think, Peter. I talked to your chair. Your chairman is Ray.
Yeah,
I think the charge calls over to be televised for that committee. So that conference room, we gotta get you in another conference room.
so,
Well, okay.
We're-
We can talk it up later. I mean,
Yeah,
the
I don't
logistics
know
of
if I
that.
have the
So,
charge here.
I mean, that's
so
fine.
for the particulars, I'm under agreement with Ray that, the public hearings will be televised. And the initial discussions would not be, but
They're open to the public and people can.
everything is open to the
attend.
public. It's, either way, that's a
We can take that.
But
discussion.
isn't it our board policy, if there's a meeting room available for any committee with that they choose that room?
If that's what you want to me to bring up to them, and I can talk
No,
to
I'm
Ray
just,
about
just
it.
in general, I mean, I'm
We
just.
do have a general policy. Some committees follow it, some do not.
It's also availability.
Right, that's
we
what I
have
mean, no,
set
if it's
policy.
available,
Yeah, I agree.
yes. I'm not saying it.
Mhm.
I mean, if it's
So
not available.
the disposition for this particular committee is it's a rather large, and then which can be an unwieldy committee. So if they're in a structured setup, then they should of course be televised, because then you know you have a room, you have availability and things like that. But if they got to meet on like the second Wednesday and then the third Tuesday to try to get everything done in the timeline, it's very difficult to set up those things. And I didn't want it to encumber the committee. Public hearings is a completely separate issue that's got to be on TV, because you're setting a specific date and you should plan around it.
Yeah, well,
Anyway, back to this particular piece. So you have selected somebody that you're going to be, and it's at least 6 weeks before they could start. So I guess we have to talk about that pretty quickly. Waiting another month to get to August 20th might be too long. So it's your particular concern that, and yours to manage as far as making sure we can keep up with the permitting processes and the demand that's out there, I guess, that's substantial. So I'll get some direction from you when we talk about this later, when we talk about next week's agenda, or next meeting's agenda.
Okay.
Is that gonna be alright?
Yeah.
Alright. Unless everybody has something that they wanna tell me to do and put on the agenda for the next. I'll work it out with them. Alright? Alright, discussion items. So we did have, some asks for, text messaging policy and, how it happens and, in the matter of one of our meetings and with regards to, open meeting law. So I placed 2 calls, well, more than 2 calls and a couple hours of waiting. All set?
Yep.
All right. I started with ethics first. Of course, it's not really an ethics thing until it becomes an ethics thing. The AG's office is the one that handles open meeting law, and unfortunately, there was no real concrete answer. There's guidance that's given, and you can find it online, but really, open meeting law incorporates emailing, and it hasn't quite caught up to social media of today's standard. So while there's recommendations, and there is a strict adherence to, if you are in a quorum, you cannot deliberate. You have to follow that structure regardless of the media that you're using. But as far as communications during a public setting that's open to the public, there's no hard and fast rule on this. And there was no real guidance that the AG's office was willing to give me that say it's this, this, and this, because they basically said it's not really governed under current open meeting. What I would suggest and what they suggested is if there's any deliberation that's going on, the quorum that's not in public view, I would recommend that you not do it. But there is nothing that says you can't do it. But one thing's tied into the other. Taking comment from the public at any one particular time is, of course, your discretion. It's your phone, it's your media device. When there's back and forth between a quorum, then it's very much illegal, and subject to a violation of open meeting. But as it stands now, it's a matter of policy. So going one step forward from that, should there be a policy, and what a chairman's position on this particular matter is, there's no real discretion from a chairman to constitute their own law. They can run the meeting and say, look, if there are devices, the chairman can elect for people not to use their devices as a distraction to the public meeting session. Much in the same fashion, if somebody were to come and record this meeting on their own personal device, which is very much in their right to do, it would be my discretion whether or not I allow it as long as it doesn't get in the way of the actual meeting itself. So there's no way for me to really to deny it. They just have to present themselves and say that they're recording to the body and then make sure that they're in a position where they're not gonna encumber the meeting, in any way, shape, or form. So, I mean, it's there and it's not there, and it doesn't look like there's really gonna be any legislation, in the immediate future to govern, tweeting, and all the other instant messaging services. So I didn't find anything more than that. That's about where it is. If we want to talk about policy regarding how we approach as a board during an open meeting session, what we want to do with our cell phone devices, we can. But from my perspective, as long as it doesn't interrupt my meeting, and when I say mine, just the meeting that I sanctioned to govern, I'm okay with it. But
So you were looking for input on a possible policy or no?
well, we can bring it up. I just, in the discussion item, I said I would go take a look at the AG's office, and I kind of spent an inordinate amount of time trying to get information, and there was like no information to give. They basically linked me to their website, which everybody can go to, that just has, yeah, we don't govern this, but yeah, you shouldn't do it.
It just seems crazy to me that, you know, we've gone through great lengths in Massachusetts over the past 30 years to make sure that we're being as open and transparent as possible in the governance of a town, and especially in a small town, it's really easy to walk outside the municipal center and find, you know, 3, 4, 5 people in Stop and Shop who want to talk to me about something, and depending who's in the crowd, that may or may not be legal. But then you come here in an actual meeting, having people texting back and forth, and that's not, you know, that communication during an open deliberation is not prohibited. But hey, it is what it is, and you know, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts isn't there yet, and that's fine. I don't like it, and I don't think, I mean, if I started doing it and I started texting you and Peter throughout the meetings, I think other people would have a problem with it. I think that, but okay, I would just rather not see it done. I think everybody, you know, when you're sitting here, pay attention to the conversation. You got something to say it. Otherwise, you know, leave it alone. You know, if I'm getting text messages from people in the audience, I think it's one thing, because I could communicate with the public as part of my job, as I keep reminding my wife when people text me. It's, you know, that's the role I play now. But, you know, when you're sitting up here, have the conversation here. I don't see why you wouldn't, but okay.
I guess furthering this topic, just as I'm the chair now, but as an individual member or what have you, I'm usually a stickler for, I want everything to be right here. Any discussion we have that has any substance to the town should happen right here. Questions for Tim, questions for Becca, outside the mundane things of doing your actual due diligence to prep for a particular meeting. You know, in the past, sometimes I've come into a meeting where I didn't have a sit down outside of it. I waited for the meeting to get my information, and you know, sometimes the appearance was that a decision had already been made or something. Somebody had more information than I had. You know, that's part and parcel to kind of what we're talking about here. But I mean, that's just my perspective. I want to see it happen here. I want to see everybody, or have everybody see it. So, if I were to set a policy, which of course I cannot enforce, I would prefer everybody have open communications. If there's a question for Tim at any one particular point, it should be asked in open air. If it's relevant to the public's discussion we're having. So that's just my particular stand on it. Any other comments, and then we can move on to the next discussion piece, which seems similar, but it is not. All right, Jen, anything? Okay, so email communications. So we have a group email for the Board of Selectmen. Somebody wants, for the Select Board. Anybody wants to reach us, it goes to a group. In this media age, I want to go a little bit beyond our traditional methods. Now, open meeting law has strict standards on how you post meetings and things like that, but it doesn't restrict you from using other tools to approach your constituents, in a public setting. Now, of course, you can't deliberate in a quorum, but anything having to do with agenda items, simple questions and things of that nature, or what's going on agenda, what should be there, etc. That's all a matter of just normal discourse, and it's completely allowed. It's when you start to deliberate between a quorum where you run into that sketchy ground with open meeting law. But from this board's perspective, we've never used a lot of those tools. And seeing that we are bringing on somebody in the part-time capacity to handle the select board duties and things of that nature, I want to make sure that we're looking for somebody with some of that savvy. And of course, this is just me. We're having a discussion on it now. It's my perspective anyways. But I think the one modality that we use now, which is just email, is about 20 years behind where we should be as far as how we talk to the people who voted us into office. So using Facebook, using other media services in the manner that we can reach out or solicit input from, I think it'd be beneficial for us. I mean, I don't think we need to get anything too crazy with it, but if we have somebody that can coordinate those type of things in the position that we're going to fill, I think it makes sure it's something that we look at. Anyway, that's why I brought it up as a discussion piece. There, I know you had something just on email
Yeah,
as well.
I'm confused as to what we're listing as correspondence. So Peter just read off some things that came to him, but you know, are we presenting for public reading every email that comes our way? Are we, you know, presenting for public reading emails that only come through the website directed to the group account? What are we determining as public correspondence to be read? Because you could just go with the intent of the letter, but even sometimes then it's not clear. Like someone sends me an email, you know, but and you know my neighbor, I got a problem with my neighbor, you know, well that's not public correspondence. It was intended for me to help them deal with a problem. And sometimes you can tell with the content of the letter what's to be public, and if it's Dear Select Board, that's easy. Other times there's a gray area. Sometimes there's stuff that gets sent to the group account that makes it to all of us. Sometimes there's stuff that gets sent to the group account you never hear about again. And I know that because I sent a letter to the Board of Selectmen way back when I was chair of the Affordable Housing Trust that never got read. So how does it work?
Right. So yeah, in that chain of thought, Mrs. Roy sent something to me, and I did not have this as correspondence tonight, and for that I apologize. So yeah, I guess right up that alley. I mean, is there a hard and fast policy we want to take a look at, or is it something that we leave up to the chair for discretion? It's certainly, if we're getting direction right to the select board, it should be us that's vetting it and making that judgment call. It shouldn't be up to staff to have to manage our email traffic and decide what should and shouldn't be our correspondence. I know that's the way it's kind of always been, but it's probably a burden that should fall on the actual elected officials, you know. So I see where you're coming from there. Anybody else have any input?
So just typically, the way I would handle that, any type of thing, is that if a piece of correspondence was addressed to the board but was sent to me as chair, I would share that with the entire committee, obviously. But one of the things that I'm not aware of is, you know, I don't know if you guys are copied on correspondence, right? So when people use their group email, I have no idea that really went to you or not. I just get a copy of an email and that's it, because it gets forwarded to my account. So it puts me in an awkward position about whether do I bring that into the public record or not without knowing, has the entire board been addressed, unless it says Dear Select Board, to your point. Right, that's addressed to all of us. So I think the way I would handle it is just let the chair, at their discretion, if they receive correspondence, to then read or put it into the public record, because technically any email correspondence to the board is subject to public record, and sometimes it pertains to agenda items, and I guess it could be part of people's input and could be put into the minutes. But
I would think that anything that's either Dear Select Board or sent to the group email. I mean, if you're hunting down the group email on the website, that seems to me to be a pretty clear intent, that you intend this to go to everybody on the board, and the people I talk to that have done that are surprised when I have no idea what they're talking about. And I can't do my job like that.
Is there any specific examples you can give me so I know what we're talking about here? In terms of not responding or not notifying the board?
Yeah, I mean, I've had people tell me that they've clicked on the email on the website, because we don't have individual email addresses listed on there. We have a group email address, and they've sent something, and they will say to me, you know, my letter wasn't read at the meeting. I sent correspondence, and again, I did that. I didn't use the email, but I wrote a letter to the Board of Selectmen back in January or February of 2015 that never got read.
There was a manner of time where I wasn't receiving anything from the group email because mine was a Yahoo address and it was bouncing back. We rectified that, but it did take a while to
But you all have Grafton, well, with the exception of Peter right now, you all have last name, first initial at grafton-ma.gov.
Yeah, that's where it fell down. It went from there to my Yahoo address, which I get everything now. But there
Oh.
was a segment of time where I did not log into my government address. I used my personal address.
I'll test it when I get home, but if it's a technical thing, that's one thing. But what I want to see happen is I would rather that whatever it is, BOS at grafton.mass.gov, go directly to either the chair or the secretary for reading than to be filtered by staff. Because this is up to us to figure out, you know, we're responsive to these people who are writing to us. That's part of the job, you know.
Maybe, you know, there was a webpage advisory committee in 2007 that came up with policies. There's a huge book in my office relative to how the BOS group is determined. Becca, if you can pull up the webpage, let me just, by way of example, if I can just show you one thing, maybe this solves the issue, and it might make it easier. The problem is it's going to be, there'll be no way that I can search this. So the bottom of this says the members' names. We can make those hyperlinks that'll go right to your email.
That'd be
They'll
good.
Open their email browser, and then they can just email you directly.
Yeah.
But if someone made a request for an email that went to Peter, I only know it if they do it at the top of that page. I can't pull that record together if they email you directly.
No, that's not what I mean. What I mean is, if someone clicks that link, email the Board of Selectmen,
Yep.
It's gonna open a form.
it's going to open a form.
Yep.
And I want that correspondence to be read aloud unless, you know, the correspondence indicates for some reason, you know, hey, I'm trying to get a hold of Jen Thomas, could you direct this to her? You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, if it becomes obvious that the correspondence is intended to be read aloud at a meeting, and again, we're all reasonable people here, we should be able to figure that out, then that's what should happen. And I think I would prefer the chair of the Board of Selectmen to make that call.
But, I mean, I guess I should be. And future chairs should be as well.
So for that link, just so I'm clear, that link to go directly to your email address.
Well, no, this one should go to everybody. Everybody should be able to see it. Of course, we can't deliberate it. 1 second, Justin. But if it's addressed to the select board and it's relevant to the topics that we're discussing in that particular evening, or if it's just somebody wanting to let us know that their girl got their gold award in Girl Scouts or something like that and wanted some public recognition for it or things like that. Maybe that's, I mean, these are all things that sometimes were coordinated through the Board of Selectmen position and being able to use that position to do some of these type of things. Outreach type of things. Yes, Jen?
I'm trying to understand, so are you saying you don't want our town staff to get these emails, that we handle all of the emails?
Well, we get.
I don't care if they-
Because sometimes there's questions that are, you know, it's just a question, you know, they're emailing us because they have a question about something that town staff answers and gets back to them, and then, you know, there's a range of things, whether it's,
We can have them get it, we can get it too.
we still get a record of it, we still get the email, so we know what's going on, but we may or may not have to respond.
Are there ones that come to this? So you're on the, so when they contact the select board, that goes to you as well?
Yeah, there's a BOS group, comes to us three staff-wise, and there's BOS at Grafton
So is
Maine,
there ever
go
a
to you.
time when there's a particular like question or something like that you just email directly to who submitted and answer a question, because it's, and we don't see it, we get them all, of course, but we don't see if like you replied to somebody. would we
I will
see that?
blind you if someone said, "Hey, you missed my
That's
trash
what I
today,"
usually see.
and or it's more substantive than that. The board, select board will be blind copy on any response I give. So it may not be an item that someone wants to read about at a meeting as correspondence. I almost think that you gotta decouple the issues.
Well, it's part of the problem is, you know, I think some people are gonna reach out to us, you know, my trash didn't get picked up, and then, you know, they'll do this. And actually, it's kind of funny because there is, if you go back, I think it says email, does it say email the select board?
It says, "Hey, select board."
Okay, and then that says contact the town administrator's office. So there's a little bit of a difference there, you know, because there's some things you might want to talk to you guys about, and there's some things people are going to want to write us about. And sometimes people may not know or particularly care. You know, nobody collected my trash today. They don't care who gets back to them. They don't want that right at the next meeting. They just want a result. I think that's easy. I mean, you guys obviously you should get everything that's tabbed there, emailed to the board of selectmen. I want you guys to get it too. But to the extent that we can determine from all the emails that we get off of that link, and we're going to have to figure out whether that link is worthwhile anyway, but that's a whole other conversation. Then I would want you to go through it and say, okay, these are the ones that are going to be read at the next meeting. Because people do say, you know, hey, listen, I sent you an email, it never got read, what's the deal?
Okay.
You know, and I'm sure this will be a work in progress, but, you know, it's important.
Well, I mean, that link that's, first of all, some of the language is a work in progress, because we got select board, some places board of selectmen, others. But that email to the board, if you click that link back, we can get that to go to the group and to the board, and then you can all make that determination of what gets read or what gets answered. It's just administratively, we'll just have to remember to blind CCU to make sure you know that somebody's dealt with it. Because it's tough when you have 4 people in the office, because I always want to say, I come in at 7 o'clock and I don't want her to respond, so I CC Becca and Cindy that I responded, so they don't respond at 8:30 when they get to their desk.
Right.
So I can certainly blind you on any of those responses, but we can set this up and change that, contact town administrator's office to be select board. And we get them, if we respond before you do, you'll see a blind response from us.
That would be helpful. And we should know better than to, like, you know, have a hot finger and, you know, reach out back to somebody on something that you guys are going to be taking care of anyway.
Yeah, but just a coordinated effort, certainly we can put the board on that, that's not a problem.
And I just thought one step further from our one means that we use now, which is this website that of course still says Board of Selectmen, to engage a public audience, which I think we should be doing more of, or at least engaging more from an executive body perspective. We should be using some of the more of the tools that are out there at our disposal to reach a larger audience. The approach we take that can't just come from me, though we have to have a discussion on it and set policy around it, which I'd like to lead us to do. But you got to get buy-in from everybody, because you know we're not all going to have individual select board accounts outside of our election year, so to speak, as one functioning page. But I think it'd be helpful for us, and it's something that we haven't really done a lot of over the past couple of years. And we have the normal turnouts at all of our events, so to speak, and perhaps we could reach more people if we're using some of these mediums.
Are you talking about something in addition to what staff already does with the town's Facebook page?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So you wanna do an additional page for the select board?
Yes. Yes.
How would we determine what goes up on that? We'd have to vote on everything.
I don't necessarily think so. We don't vote on an agenda. I set the agenda. Chair does. I mean, can be some discretion there. We also usually have staff. We just don't have it right now. That's Board of Selectmen staff. It's going to be a temporary position. We talked about this a lot, but
Well, part-time, not temporary, but the plate, as Ed will tell you relative to meeting minutes, we are gonna be straight out with this part-time person. So to manage another page, I think will be certainly, we can try it, I just don't know.
Alright, well, so if it's a matter of staff type of thing, then, you know, we can have that discussion too. If it's a matter we can't use those medium because we don't have enough money to pay somebody to actually facilitate it. But, as far as I can see now, it should be fairly short on time. Anyways, I don't want to belabor the point, but if we see it on further agendas, just spend a little bit of time thinking on it now that I brought it up and see if there's a way we can do it. If you really are adamantly opposed to it, I think it'd be beneficial for us. I think we, for committee assignments, although I'm encouraged by the 2 members that kind of seem to come out of nowhere for the Affordable Housing Trust, by and large, we swim in a fairly shallow pool, and broadening that pool, getting a little bit of depth to it, has always been a challenge. I don't think we've actually approached that challenge as a select board.
Well, it'd be one of those things too, I think would be time well spent to talk about at the goals session. I don't think, you know, it's not just us, nobody's cracked the code on getting increased involvement or communication in municipalities, and these days, you know, social media can be a tool, but it's also as challenging as ever with people being so fragmented with how they get information. You know, you ask, I'm sure everybody in this room gets their information slightly different ways. Some people are very partial to Twitter, some people still read newspapers, some people are on Facebook, some people just wait until somebody else that they know talks to them about something and fills them in, so it can be very, very difficult.
We can't capture everybody. Legitimately, we don't really try to go beyond the normal means that we've taken, and that they've tried and true, and we get very little participation. So they're tried and true in the fact that they get very little participation, and we never really made a significant effort to reach people outside of putting up signs and things like that, like the DPW sign things, which is all very, very helpful and very encouraging. But I mean, there's groups in town, whether you like them or not, but they garnish a lot of attention, and you don't need to really tap into that, what is being discussed in those groups. But if that many people are discussing in those groups, if you had access to them, direct access to them, maybe it's beneficial. I mean, maybe it doesn't work, I don't know. I just would like to go through the practice and see.
Sure.
And I don't tweet myself, but maybe that is a legitimate, people would sign up to follow an account on the select board that would see our agendas, you know, on their way home from work in a very digestible format, as opposed to going on our calendar page.
That's a fair point.
So, you know, maybe we get 50 more people. Is 50 worth it? I think so.
Sure.
So, anyway.
Swing an election.
Well, that's 'cause our
Just
elections-
saying, it's true around here.
Our elections consist of less than 15% typically of our voting populace, which is very, very discouraging.
Meeting minutes.
Oh, so we're moving on. We're gonna do some meeting minutes now. We have 3 to go over. Mr. Carlson is gonna read us a motion. You can do all 3 if you like.
If everyone's amenable to that.
Sure.
I make a motion that the board approve the meeting minutes for February 19th, 2019, March 5th, 2019, and March 12th, 2019 as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? I love when I get reined in when I start to ramble. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We passed the meeting minutes. That's pretty much all we got here, unless we wanna go back into executive session.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.